Hi, parents. As you may know by now, I have spent the last 20 years helping thousands of families navigate the seemingly insane, please make it stop college admissions process. And yeah, I've seen it all screaming matches between parent and child, teenagers melting down with anxiety at various parts of their junior and senior years, and even parents walking into my office unannounced while I was in a meeting because they had an urgent question that couldn't wait. However, I've also seen the absolute joy of seeing a teenager get into that first choice college. And I've seen kids grow into their best selves as they go through the admissions process. So in this video, I'm going to talk about some of my favorite ways that you as parents can help your teenager get into the best colleges in America without all the stress. Really. In fact, let's dive into 10 practical strategies that might defy conventional wisdom by using a real student who recently got accepted to Stanford, Columbia, Northwestern, UChicago, Pomona, and Princeton. First, let's introduce Jenny. Jenny is a smart girl who actually enjoyed learning, but had a lot of doubts about what she should do for college, what she should major in, and what she should do for a career. Jenny often thought too much. But this is often the norm, not the rule, especially in an age where teenagers constantly compare themselves to beautiful, successful, perfect people on TikTok, forgetting that it's almost all fake, including the latest AI influencers or people who don't actually exist. Damn, it's hard to be a teenager these days. So, strategy number 1, she started with authenticity. Jenny liked to write stories, and when she took the career aptitude test on Truity.com, her answers demonstrated that she was a creative humanitarian, or someone whose strengths were using creativity and wanting to make a difference in the world. Consequently, instead of joining the robotics team, the Model UN team, the baking club, and starting a campaign to save the whales, she leaned into what she enjoyed doing and was naturally good at. She wrote fun stories about aliens and contract killers and stuffed animals that came to life. She also read books on restorative justice, knitted some awesome beanies for her friends, and taught herself the ukulele. And in the summers, she attended various writing programs so she could continue to develop her skills and give herself the time and space to write without interruption. She didn't win any awards because she didn't apply for them. She wrote simply because she enjoyed it. 2, she maximized her time to focus on what was important. She didn't take every AP class at her school. She took most of them, but she avoided the ones that were considered work factories, so she could have enough time to act in a few school plays, hang out with her friends, pursue her outside interests, and see Taylor Swift in concert, obviously. Number 3, she created a plan. Each week, she would write out what she had to do for school and what activities she wanted to spend time on. She made a list of goals that were broken up into action items. She then estimated the time it would take to finish each one. She then used her Google Calendar to block out times where she would set appointments with herself that could not be moved, kind of like she was scheduling a doctor's appointment. This planning allowed her to get realistic on what she could and couldn't accomplish each week, while also allowing her to schedule relaxation time and move blocks around if, say, a big test suddenly got announced or something took longer than expected. In other words, even though the plan rarely went exactly the way she thought it would, the fact that she even had a plan made a huge difference in getting things done. 4, she began getting excited about colleges. During winter break of her junior year, she started to use resources to poke around colleges. She did Google searches and an interest-specific search on the College Board website for colleges with strong writing programs. She began reading the 2-page college profiles in the Fisk Guide to the Colleges, underlining what she liked and didn't like so she could easily go back and review the schools. She watched day-in-the-life videos on YouTube and TikTok and searched Googles for drone flyovers and virtual tours of the colleges just to get a sense of the campuses. And she used the student review website Unigo to read about what actual students had to say. Sure, doing this work scared her about having to live in a dorm room with some stranger for a year away from her parents, dog, and stuffed animals that came to life. But at the same time, it also excited her and kept her motivation high during those weeks when she had tests or when her mean chemistry teacher kept springing pop quizzes on material that she hadn't covered. 5, she started visiting colleges slowly when they were in session and talked to actual students. Jenny and her parents began seeing local colleges near their homes on Saturdays or on days when she had off from school. And someone gave her the idea to break away from her parents, walk up to a group of students, and ask them what they thought about the place. Obviously, this person who gave her this advice was very wise. She found that she had learned more in 10 minutes from a student than she did on the 90-minute tour and information session. On one campus, she was invited to sit in on an English class with a student, and on another, she was invited to a party. After seeing more schools farther away from home during her spring break, she realized that what she had been hearing about reputations really wasn't true. She was finding smart, interesting students at a variety of schools, not just the top 10. And she began to understand that her choices should be based more on schools that matched her interest and personality rather than on name and reputation only. 6. She also started planning well in advance of the college admissions process. Looking at deadlines and essay requirements from previous years, Jenny put together a plan to start working on the Common Application and writing drafts of her main essay in the summer before her senior year. By doing this, she made the stunning realization that the terrible college essays everyone seemed to be complaining about weren't all that bad. Most were only 250 words. She had thought they were all like 3 to 4 pages long. She also discovered that many colleges asked modified versions of the same question. So even if she applied to 12 colleges, she would only have to write like 5 to 8 short answers, not 50 essays. Now, while she wouldn't know all the questions until August 1st of her senior year when they're typically released, she could write her personal statement or main college essay and do the biggest time suck of all, which is number 7, why research. What's why research? Well, it's a crucial component of the application process that the majority of students do not spend enough time on. She would set aside an hour a week to do a deep dive into a college's website, read about their overall philosophy and their academic programs, the available courses, the research opportunities, the study abroad programs, and the clubs. She would copy anything that was particularly interesting to her and paste it into a Google Doc that she made for each school on her interest list. Now, doing this research not only allowed her to discover programs she hadn't known existed, for example, American Studies at Stanford sounded cool, or the Beyond Boundaries program at Wash U seemed interesting, and the Kelly Writers House at the University of Pennsylvania offered applicants a way to get their writing evaluated by the director who could potentially advocate for applicants. This research also allowed her to compare programs among colleges. Most importantly, it gave her a tremendous amount of material to use for some of her college's supplemental essays, including why she wanted to go to places like Northwestern, Yale, Cornell, and Michigan. She also found she would return to her why research to prepare for the few interviews she got after turning in her applications. Most importantly, it gave her a tremendous amount of material to use for some of her college's supplemental essays, including the why essays or why she wanted to attend those schools. Now, this is probably a good place to mention that if you want to get these 10 steps in written form, as well as a free copy of my latest book, How to Get Accepted into America's Top Colleges, join my absolutely free parent community at AskDanny.com. Clever, right? Or by clicking on the link in the description. I created it to provide parents like you with answers and guidance to make your lives less stressful and to help your teenagers grow into the best versions of themselves. It's completely free, and you can even meet me live online to ask specific questions all throughout the year. So I look forward to seeing you soon. Number 8, she reached out to admissions officers to ask questions. She had heard from many people, including her school counselor, that many colleges no longer cared about demonstrated interest, or the idea that students need to make regular contact with the school to show interest. Yet that same wise, funny, and good-looking mentor explained how admissions was still a people process. She understood this to mean that individuals would be evaluating her personal qualities as an applicant, which meant that admissions officers were actual human beings, not robots who used a huge rubber stamp with the word rejected on it. Thus, once she had some real reasons why she liked certain colleges, or in other words, after she had done her why research for a particular school, she looked up the admissions officer's name and email address on each college's website and sent them a genuine, heartfelt email introducing herself and stating some of the specific reasons that she'd become interested in applying. Then she asked a couple of questions that had come up while doing her why research. Just about every admissions officer got back to her with answers, and Jenny would continue corresponding with them about when they would be coming to her school or the local area to visit, as well as ask other questions. Number 9, she did her best not to buy into the drama. By fall, she was already well ahead of every one of her friends at school, most of whom hadn't done any research other than visiting campuses. Her friends also hadn't started the application, hadn't looked up the essay questions, and really had no plan for getting work done. Understandably, her friends started to freak out anytime anyone would ask them about college, especially their parents. And it seemed like anytime she got together with her friends, they would create a lot of drama based on their perceived amount of time that the apps would take them, whether they would get into their dream school, and who else was applying or competing against them. Jenny smiled and did her best not to let her friends' stress rub off on her, although it was still challenging at times. She also tried to help some of her friends get ahead, but otherwise didn't rub it in her friends' faces that she wasn't stressed like they were. Number 10, she ended with authenticity. Throughout the summer, she had learned that essay writing was really about storytelling. And since she was already pretty good at this, she would brainstorm moment stories, like anecdotes, of things that she experienced that either taught her lessons or allowed her to show an interest in an activity. She had also heard from various admissions officers that what they connected with the most, especially after having to have read 2,000 applications in a row, was authenticity and vulnerability. Therefore, instead of trying to show herself to be the perfect student or flex about her accomplishments or come up with some dramatic story to get an admissions officer to feel sympathy, she went with stories that were true to who she was. In fact, here is the beginning and end of her personal statement. Here's the beginning. I was a 9th grade emo. I wore black hoodies zipped up and hid my face behind a tangled rat's nest of hair that went down to my waist. I listened to angry, grating rock about death by people pretending to be vampires. I hid in my room, shrouded in darkness, half hoping someone would walk in and see how miserable I looked. Even though I thought I was poetically edgy and tortured, I was really an anxious, closeted lesbian with braces who couldn't sleep without a nightlight and only had one friend. But at the time, it seemed easier to be angry than confused and scared, so I kept up with the charade, fully convinced my 5'3", 15-year-old freshman self was a dangerous yet intriguing paragon of darkness. Okay, here's the end of her personal statement. I am now a 12th grade free spirit. I religiously wear rainbow unicorn socks and rainbow-laced combat boots. I wear my hair in a short bob that bounces when I walk and shakes excitedly when I dance. I listen to upbeat music through my limited edition Mickey Mouse headphones and lip sync while I walk. I talk about whatever obscure sci-fi book I'm obsessed with at the moment to anyone who will listen, and memorize male Shakespeare monologues in my free time. I'm a proud out-lesbian who spouts Sappho quotes. I write hopelessly surreal poems about spaceships and moon boots and monstrous cat goddesses with opal whisker teeth and expired beer legs. I give hugs and dance ballet in my room and wear my Elsa dress to anime conventions and sleep with a nightlight that protects blue stars onto my ceiling. I am the living embodiment of the freedom and whimsy of my surrealist poetry, and I'm happier than I've ever been. Now, between the beginning and end of this transformation essay, she wrote about how she discovered her love of writing, specifically poetry, and how it allowed her to become the most fearless and authentic version of herself. And she also included her poetry as part of a 10-page writing portfolio to certain colleges that would accept it. And most importantly, throughout all this, she managed to get plenty of sleep and maintain a good relationship with her parents. Now, does this mean that there was zero stress? No. No matter what, Jenny had to navigate the rigors of high school, social cliques, not getting the lead in the play, getting broken up with, not passing her driver's test for the first time, dealing with relatives at Thanksgiving who were all constantly asking her about where she wanted to go to college, and trying not to compare herself to her friends, all of whom seemed to want to go to the same college as she did. Yikes. For her parents, they had to balance being supportive while not being overbearing. They had to encourage her while also letting her fail and learn her own lessons. They also had to grapple with the fact that their baby, the love of their lives that they had spent 17 years raising, now didn't need or want their help and soon would be rushing into the world that they weren't completely sure that they had prepared her for. This doesn't even cover the waiting they had to endure once she applied, especially after she had applied early decision to Brown and was flat out rejected. She wasn't even deferred, even though she would go on to get into all the schools I mentioned before. In other words, the college admissions process still sucks. However, one day after she received her first acceptance to Pomona College, she said, this process wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it would be, and it was definitely better than what my friends went through. And if you're thinking, well, Danny, my child doesn't even know what to wear in the morning, let alone loves to write, don't worry. In my next video, I'm going to show you how you can help your child discover and develop passions that are authentic. I hope you'll join me.